The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So this book was copyright 1979, and I have a US paperback here from Pocket Books that was probably printed sometime in the early to mid 80s. It's a 10th printing of the original kind of print run, and the only difference, if you found a first printing of this book, you wouldn't have the references to some of the other later books that Douglas Adams wrote. Now, this is going to be a slightly different video. I'm not really going to talk about the plot of this book because I kind of assume that most people have either read this book or watched the faithfully adapted movie that came out not so long ago. And so I'm kind of just going to talk about some of the things that this brought up to me on reading it for my third time. Now, I had read this previously twice in my life, and I knew it was on this list. I knew I was going to be reading it again, and I had a little reluctance about it. And so I went to my library through the Libby app, and I saw that they had an audiobook that was narrated by Stephen Fry. And so I got on the waiting list for that book. It took months and months, which shows you how popular this book still is. And I had a lot of fun listening to the audiobook of this. You know, it didn't really remind me of anything I forgot. I'm very familiar with the story, the writing, but having Stephen Fry narrate it is just pretty good. I think you kind of have to have someone with a British accent narrating this book. It just is, it's very fitting. So, like I said, I'm not going to talk about the plot, but I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on this book. And why I think, if you haven't read this for some reason, it does have some pros and cons, but I think it's almost one of those books that you feel obligated to read. And you can get a lot of enjoyment out of this book, even on the third time through. So, this is one of those books that it kind of transcends the average SF genre reader. And you're going to run across people from all walks of life who have never read anything else science fiction related, but possibly they've given this one a go. And I don't know how many copies of this book are out there, how many different adaptations, the movie, it's permeated the culture, and it's had a lot of lasting staying power, really. It's came out 40 plus years ago. And it still took me months to get a copy of this through my library. The biggest con that I've heard people say is some of the British humor. Maybe you don't quite relate to it. And for me, I thought it's hilarious, always up front. I just completely enjoy the book. But towards the end, I kind of get fatigued by the jokes, by the humor, the witty British humor kind of just wears on me, and I think that's the biggest con. But if you can get over that, there's so much to like about this book. There's the plot that's pretty interesting, and the way he crafted the novel keeps you engaged. There's the characters who are, once again, if some of the humor gets to you, there's some characters you might not like, but they're memorable characters, and they'll stick with you. Some of the humor and some of the oddities that these characters have, they're great. The satire and making fun of so many things. Douglas Adams makes fun of all the science fiction tropes. The book makes fun of itself. It makes fun of humanity and social norms and so many things, but it kind of does it in a respectful way, and it can get slightly over the top, but I think it's all done pretty well. One of the biggest things too that, I've always been a little let down by the ending on this one, I guess. But other than that, this is an enjoyable read. My wife, she's not much of a science fiction reader, and I think about a year ago she read this book, and she was just laughing and giggling through the whole thing. And I asked her recently, hey, looking back on your read of this book, what do you think? And she said, oh, it's funny, and she remembers the plot and all that, but I think that's what most people think of is in this book. It was funny and it was fun. And, so that's kind of all I got to say about this book. I've always been curious about the sequels and maybe even some of other novels that Douglas Adams has written. But so far, this is the only book of his that I've ever read. I think when I get to the end of this book, I'm always just like, I'm kind of over it a little bit in a way. And I just have this preconceived idea that the sequels are just formulaic. And that's just my own opinion. I know nothing really about them. So please let me know if the novels do some other interesting, fun things and he kind of breaks out and gives you a little bit more than a formulaic, sequel after sequel, then maybe I will kind of hit one of these sequels up here and then, maybe as a palate cleanser or something. But, this is always going to be on my bookshelf, I think. It's just one of those books. It's a conversation starter. You can talk to people about it, non-science fiction readers. My only hope is that this is more of a gateway book for someone who wants to try out science fiction. I hope they don't think that all science fiction is like this. I hope this encourages them to go out and read some other works of science fiction that, go into some other styles, maybe not so much humor, but just let them read some other kinds of books. So, that's it for this one. Third time through. I don't know if I'll ever revisit this one again. I think I know the plot almost by heart at this point. I think I've seen the movie twice, but I'm just going to leave it at that. And once again, thanks for watching.